Hi everyone, we're going to be reviewing one of the most famous, if not the most famous chess game ever played. This was played back in 1851 in London. It was a friendly match between two players back then that were very strong. Anderson, who had the white pieces, and Kesaritsky, who had the black pieces. And this game was so impressive to the loser that he actually telegrammed it back to France, showing the brilliant attacking combination of his opponent. And from there it became really popular. And it's featured in some films like Blade Runner, for example, where the replicant's playing and it's the mating net at the end with the three moves was featured on the board. So it's pretty popular. And yeah, let's just go through it. If you haven't seen it, you're in for a treat. So back then, e4, e5, this was the way you played the game in 1851. It was the gentlemanly way of opening the match. And after f4, it was also considered the gentlemanly thing to do to accept gambits like this. So this was the king's gambit accepted. Now bishop c4 just grabs this long diagonal here, so this is a great bishop, of course, for white, because this is a great attacking diagonal. And black exploits the fact that this diagonal is weak now after f4 by checking the king. The king loses castling privileges after king f1, but now you can see that this queen is relatively exposed. So after knight f3, for instance, white's going to gain a tempo on this queen. So he's down a pawn and his king's lost castling privileges within the first 4 moves of the game. But in exchange, he's going to be able to develop very quickly. So b5, multi-purpose move. It looks a bit weird, I know, but the idea is that if white takes, it's off this diagonal. But also, it does allow the bishop to develop more rapidly as well. So this pawn just gains a little bit of time on this bishop. So white accepts, and now you see knight f6 threatening knight takes e4. And before that can happen, though, white kicks the queen with knight f3 attacking this queen, so the queen has to step back, and d3 now. Just developing, protecting this pawn, but also you can see here pressuring f4, which is going to be a key central point in this game. Now knight h5 is a little tactical shot by black. The idea is that, let's just say white plays something random. The idea is that knight g3 forks these two, and if you take, you lose your rook down here. So white, of course, sees this and wants to parry this threat. He plays knight h4, but better than knight h4, according to the engine, is rook g1. You'll notice if you put this game through an engine, it's full of mistakes, but that's not why it's famous. So we see knight h4 instead, and now after queen g5, black's threatening this bishop over here on b5, but also this knight on h4. So white plays knight f5 to protect both of those, bringing that knight to a square that's defended and also cutting off the attack of this bishop here. And after c6, we see g4. So black's threatening this bishop, but white's also threatening this knight. But after knight f6, you can see that, yes, there's an attack here and there's an attack here, but white decides to go one way, and from here it's all very one way. And what do I mean by this? White puts himself on a path where he's going to sacrifice a lot of material, and this is where it begins, in exchange for a lot of development and a lot of space and activity. So it begins with rook g1, protecting this pawn instead of protecting the bishop over here. So white's giving up his bishop. So black accepts, of course, but now you'll notice that this queen after knight f6 is also relatively boxed in because it can't go back to d8 or f6 or wherever. There's not a lot of squares for this queen to go. And after h4, it starts to become clear what's white's plan is. So h4 attacks the queen, queen steps back, h5 attacks the queen again, queen steps forward, and now queen f3, white's got 2 threats now. The first threat is just bishop takes f4. Now if that were on the board, this black queen would be trapped because that's covered by the knight, that's covered by the knight, that's covered by the pawn, etc. So, and of course this bishop would be attacking this queen over here. So that's the first threat, but the second threat is also just e5, because let's just say black did something random. E5 attacks this knight and also attacks the rook here in the corner. So black wants to parry both of these threats, and he does that by playing knight g8. So the idea is that this queen has a flight square now, but also if e5 is played, this pawn isn't attacking this knight. So white follows up by playing bishop takes f4, and now we see queen f6. And that's threatening b2, so white plays knight c3, protecting that. But now you can see, if you do a tally of the pieces here, yes, black is up a piece, but if you look at the activity of white's pieces, it's very, very high compared to all the black pieces here on the back rank. And look at all the space that white has as well. His pawns are very far advanced. There's a lot of ways for him to maneuver around the board. And this black king is very exposed. So you would argue that white's got he's got compensation for giving up that piece for sure. Black plays bishop c5, threatening the rook, and this is where white really commits to his path of giving up everything for the attack. So we see knight d5, threatening this queen, but just allowing the black queen to come in here onto b2 now. So the queen comes in, and now both rooks are under attack. So does white decide to defend one of them or do something like that? No, he doesn't. He just plays bishop d6, really just cutting off more squares for this black king now, and black goes on a rook grabbing fest. Now he grabs this rook on g1, and now we see the net start to tighten around black after e5. And the idea behind e5 is that it cuts off the queen from protecting this g7 square, and that's significant because now this knight can come in here and take with check. So you can see the noose around the black position is getting tighter and tighter. Black plays queen takes a1, sorry, grabbing another rook. And after king e2, the losing move here was played, which was knight a6, but the reason why that's losing is that if black played bishop a6, there would have been an extra flight square for him to go to. But after knight a6, there's a mate in 3 here. I'll let you pause to see if you can find it. So if you found the mate in 3, congratulations. You've solved the Immortal game of London 1851. Starts with knight takes g7, and after king d8, if you saw this, congrats, queen f6. So that, of course, means the black king has no choice but to accept the queen by playing knight takes f6, and now you see bishop e7. And you can see here that the white pieces have mated the king. So white's given up a queen, both of his rooks here, and the piece, the bishop, to mate this black king. And you can see that black still has both of his rooks, both of his bishops, and both of his knights, and a queen, but he's checkmated, and white's literally given up almost everything. So that's why it's the Immortal game. That's why it's famous. It was a really brilliant attacking game by Anderson, and that's why it's so famous and popular. And this was the way chess was played back then to a degree. It was about romantic attacks and, going all in. And whereas the games today are very, a lot more robotic and defensive and conservative. So yeah, that's why it's the Immortal game. It's very famous. Not particularly sound because there were a lot of errors in the game, but yeah, that's it. That's one of the most famous, if not the most famous chess game in the world. So I hope you guys found that interesting. If you're into chess, consider subscribing because we're going to cover all sorts of famous and fantastic games. This is just the first one. So until next time, see you. Bye.